The room is cold. A single candle burns on a heavy oak table, its flame dancing in a draft that should not exist. The light catches the uneven edge of a yellowed parchment, revealing ink that has faded to the color of dried blood. Some warnings refuse to die. They are etched into the margins of history, waiting for the world to break so they can be read again. The quill rests beside the inkwell, its tip still damp. The parchment is covered in cramped, frantic script that seems to shift when the light flickers. This is not a record of a man who saw the future. It is a map of why we desperately need him to have done so. We are looking at the anatomy of a prophecy. The wax pools at the base of the candle, hardening into jagged shapes. Every word on this page acts as a mirror, reflecting the cracks in our own time. We are here to peel back the layers of the quatrains attributed to Michel de Nostradamus. We will explore how a 16th century physician became the architect of our modern apocalyptic anxiety. By the end of this journey, you will understand not just the verses, but the mechanism of fear that keeps them alive. The candle sputters, casting long, reaching shadows against the wall. The warning is clear. The margins are waiting. The candle flame dies, leaving only the sound of a quill scratching against dry paper. The screen shifts. We are no longer in the room. We see stone arches buckling under the weight of time, mortar turning to dust in a slow, rhythmic collapse. A silhouette emerges against a horizon stained the color of a fresh bruise. It is a figure in a heavy, beak-like mask, standing motionless as the world behind it burns. This is the landscape that birthed the warnings. It is a world of rot and frantic survival. We see the ink-stained fingers of a man clutching a quill, his hand trembling as he records the end of all things. The images flash a city street, emptied by sickness, a crown rolling through mud, the sky choked with thick, black smoke. These are not mere drawings. They are the artifacts of a mind drowning in dread. We are tracing the anatomy of a collapse. The plague doctor turns, his mask catching the dying light of a setting sun. The stone continues to fall, piece by piece, as if the history itself is losing its grip. The quill strikes the parchment again. The cycle begins. The ink on the page dries, but the questions remain fresh. We have seen the crumbling stone and the masked figures, yet these are only the symptoms of a deeper, more persistent infection. We must now turn our gaze toward the source. Our objective is to peel back the layers of the quatrains attributed to Michel de Nostradamus, not to validate them, but to dissect them. We are not here to act as believers, but as surgeons of history. We will examine how a single physician became the architect of our anxiety. This is a challenge to the viewer. Look beyond the verses. Look past the fire and the blood. We are investigating the mechanism of fear itself, the invisible engine that keeps these ancient lines breathing long after their author has turned to dust. Why do we cling to these cryptic warnings? Why does the human mind find comfort in the promise of catastrophe? We will strip away the superstition to reveal the psychological scaffolding. The parchment is just the beginning. The real mystery lies in the reader. The investigation starts now. We step back into the year 1555. It is a landscape defined by the absence of order. In the streets of France, the air is thick with the scent of vinegar and burning herbs, a futile defense against the invisible rot of the plague. Families bolt their doors, listening to the rhythmic tolling of bells that mark the passing of the dead. This is not a distant, academic history. It is a world where the fabric of society is being shredded by religious war. Neighbors turn against neighbors, and the certainty of the morning is a luxury no one can afford. Amidst this, we find Nostradamus. He is a man of medicine, a scholar who has seen the limits of human knowledge in the face of mass death. He has buried his own, felt the cold weight of grief, and watched as the institutions he trusted failed to stop the collapse. The ink he uses is the only tool he has to impose structure on a world that has decided to burn. The world of 1555 was not just defined by the plague, but by the relentless clatter of the printing press. This machine changed everything. It took the written word, once a slow, deliberate craft, and turned it into a weapon of mass communication. Metal type slammed against paper, thousands of times a day, churning out pamphlets that traveled faster than the disease itself. Information became a contagion. Every rumor of a fallen king, every report of a comet in the sky, every whisper of divine retribution was captured in ink and scattered across the continent. People who had never left their villages were suddenly reading about the collapse of distant empires. The press did not just report the news. It manufactured a collective state of alarm. It fed the fires of religious war by giving every faction a megaphone. This was the environment that shaped the future of prophecy. The technology created a hunger for certainty that the old, quiet ways of scholarship could no longer satisfy. It demanded something louder, something more urgent, something that could explain the chaos in a single terrifying image. Nostradamus did not just write in a time of death. He wrote for a public that was being conditioned by the press to expect the end of the world. The ink was already wet, and the machinery of fear was waiting for his voice to fill the void. Michel de Nostradamus was not born into the shadows. He was a man of the light, a physician trained in the rigorous traditions of Montpellier. He spent his days in the damp, crowded clinics of southern France, applying poultices and bleeding patients in a desperate bid to hold back the tide of infection. He knew the anatomy of the human body better than he knew the secrets of the stars, but science failed him. He returned home one evening to find his house silent, his wife and children claimed by the very pestilence he fought in the streets. The loss was absolute. It stripped away his faith in the healing arts and left him with a hollow space where his purpose had been. He did not retreat into silence. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the margins of his medical texts. He began to fill the empty spaces of his journals. He stopped recording symptoms and started recording patterns. He saw the world through the lens of his own bereavement. He translated the raw, jagged edges of his grief into a language of symbols. He was a scholar who had outlived his own life. Nostradamus did not write in the clear, diagnostic language of a physician. He abandoned the precision of his medical training for the dense, shifting terrain of the quatrain. He understood that to speak plainly in 1555 was to invite the wrath of the Inquisition or the mockery of the court. Instead, he crafted a labyrinth of words. He wove metaphors of celestial bodies and dying kings into a tapestry that defied linear reading. Every line was a deliberate obstruction, a puzzle designed to be solved only by the reader's own projection. He utilized archaic syntax and borrowed imagery from ancient texts to create an aura of timeless authority. He did not describe an event. He hinted at a shape. He spoke of the Great Fire or the fallen star, without anchoring these images to a specific date or name. This ambiguity was his primary tool. By refusing to be specific, he ensured that his verses could never be proven wrong. He layered his meanings like a palimpsest, where one interpretation sat beneath another, waiting to be uncovered by the next generation. He was not merely writing a book, he was engineering a mystery. The ink had barely dried on the parchment before the verses began to detach themselves from the page. We move now from the architecture of his cryptic style to the substance of the visions themselves. These are the quatrains that have anchored themselves in the public consciousness, refusing to fade even as the centuries turn. They are not merely lines of poetry. They are fragments of a fractured reality. When we open the pages of his work, we are confronted by a lexicon of catastrophe. We find verses that speak of cities dissolving into ash, of heaven's bleeding light, and of monarchs losing their grip on the world. These images are not subtle. They are sharp, jagged, and immediate. They bypass the intellect and strike directly at the instinctual fear of collapse. For 400 years, these specific lines have served as the primary lens through which we view our own moments of crisis. They are the recurring nightmares of history, codified into verse. We do not read them to understand the past. We read them to find a name for the terror we see in the present. The verses burn with a singular, recurring intensity. We find the sky itself turning into a weapon. The text speaks of fire descending from the heavens, a sudden, blinding light that leaves nothing but ash in its wake. This is not a metaphor for change. It is a vision of absolute erasure. The imagery is relentless. We see the monarch, the symbol of order and continuity, stripped of his crown and cast into the blood-stained earth. The fall is not quick. It is a slow, agonizing disintegration of power. These lines describe the collapse of the city walls, the silence of the markets, and the sudden, violent end of dynasties. Every quatrain acts as a hammer blow against the illusion of stability. The fire is always coming. The king is always falling. The reader is invited to witness the total dissolution of the state. There is no mercy in these lines, only the cold, mechanical certainty of ruin. The dread is not in the history, it is in the anticipation of the next collapse. We must confront a fundamental truth about these verses. They are not maps of the future. They are Rorschach tests written in ink. When a reader stares into the jagged lines of a quatrain, they do not see a prophecy unfolding. They see a mirror. The text is intentionally porous, a collection of vague symbols and shifting metaphors that demand a context to become whole. We bring our own anxieties to the page. We project our specific, modern terrors onto the ancient, ambiguous words. If the world feels fragile, we read the verses as a warning of collapse. If we fear the loss of order, we interpret the lines as a chronicle of falling kings. The words remain static, yet the meaning shifts with the pulse of the era. It is a psychological feedback loop. We search for patterns in the chaos, and because the human mind is wired to find order in the void, we find exactly what we brought with us. The projection does not stop at the fall of kings. It bleeds into our most primal biological terrors. When a new pathogen sweeps across borders, the search for a match begins in earnest. Readers scour the quatrains for mentions of the great sickness or the air turned to poison. They isolate a single word, a vague reference to a city or a season, and suddenly the ancient text is transformed into a medical report. The plague is no longer a historical footnote. It is a prophecy fulfilled. This same mechanism powers our fear of the tyrant. When political systems buckle and strong men rise to power, the verses are mined for evidence of a coming dictatorship. We look for the man in the iron mask or the leader of the northern lands. We force the text to speak to our current political climate. It is a relentless cycle. The pestilence returns, the tyrant emerges, and the reader reaches for the book to confirm that this chaos was always inevitable. When the ground stops shaking and the smoke clears, the real work begins. It is not the work of rebuilding, but the work of explaining. In the immediate aftermath of a disaster, the human mind rejects the idea of randomness. We scan the wreckage, looking for a sign that the chaos was not an accident. We reach for the records. We open the old, heavy volumes of verse. We look for a line that matches the date, the location, or the specific nature of the collapse. It is a frantic, deliberate hunt for a narrative. We ignore the verses that do not fit. We discard the lines that speak of peace or prosperity. We highlight only the fragments that mirror the ruin we see outside our windows. This is the mechanism of the search. We are not looking for truth. We are looking for a culprit, or a cause that predates our suffering. We want to believe that the tragedy was written, that it was destined, and that it was known. By finding a match, no matter how strained we impose a sense of order on the void, we transform a random, senseless catastrophe into a chapter of a pre-existing story. We are not just reading the past, we are constructing a reason for the present. The disaster provides the raw material, and our need for structure provides the architecture. We build a bridge from the rubble to the page, desperate to find a name for the unknown. Fear is the adhesive. It is the invisible force that binds a 16th century verse to a 21st century disaster. Without the heat of our own terror, these lines are merely ink on brittle paper, inert and disconnected. But when a crisis erupts, the temperature of our collective anxiety rises, and the glue begins to set. We take a vague, centuries-old stanza and press it firmly against the jagged edges of our current reality. The fit is never perfect, yet we force it. We ignore the gaps. We overlook the contradictions. We hammer the ancient words into the modern wound until they seem to belong together. This is not a logical connection. It is a psychological lock. Once the bond is formed, the verse ceases to be a historical curiosity and becomes a prophecy. The fear creates a feedback loop. The more we fear the event, the more we need the prophecy to explain it. And the more we need the prophecy, the more real the fear becomes. We look for a sign in the dark, and because we are terrified, we find one. We are the architects of our own inescapable trap. The disaster strikes, and the clock begins to tick. Within hours, the public turns to the quatrains. They do not read for wisdom. They read for a match. They scan the lines, eyes darting over the ink, searching for a single word that mirrors the debris. A mention of a city, a reference to a king, a vague hint of fire. They find a symbol. They find a location. Suddenly, the verse is solved. This is the mechanism of retrospective fitting. It is a systematic process of reverse engineering reality. We take the established tragedy and hold it up against the ancient text like a stencil. If the lines do not align, we shift the stencil. We interpret a metaphor as a literal event. We force the fit until the verse clicks into place. It is not an act of discovery. It is an act of manufacture. We are not finding a prophecy that was hidden in the text. We are projecting our current ruin onto the page. We build the connection stone by stone, desperate to prove that the chaos was anticipated. We are writing it in the margins of our own panic. Consider the possibility that the prophecy never contained the event at all. We operate under the assumption that the text is a map, but it is actually a mirror. When the world breaks, we do not look to the verse to see what will happen. We look to the verse to explain what has already occurred. The event provides the context, not the prophecy. The tragedy is the primary source. The quatrain is merely the secondary shadow. Without the disaster to anchor it, the verse remains a collection of disjointed nouns and abstract verbs, floating in a vacuum of irrelevance. It is the catastrophe that gives the text its weight. It is the blood in the streets that grants the ink its authority. We have inverted the order of causality. We believe the prophecy predicted the fire, but it is the fire that ignites the prophecy. This is the jarring reality. The text is a static, hollow vessel, and we are the ones who pour our current trauma into it. We are not reading a warning from the past. We are witnessing the desperate, mechanical need of the present to make sense of its own destruction. Now, we look at the recurring motifs that drive this cycle. The burning city, the fallen monarch, the sky turning black. These images flash by with mechanical precision. We see the smoke rising from stone towers, the crown rolling across cold marble, the streets choked with ash. These are not descriptions of a single event. They are the recurring vocabulary of disaster. Every time a king falls, we reach for the verse about blood on the throne. Every time a city burns, we hunt for the line about fire from the sky. The motifs are archetypal, stripped of time and geography. They are designed to be universal. A monarch falling in the 16th century looks exactly like a leader toppling in the 21st, provided you ignore the details. The fire is always hot. The ash is always gray. The collapse is always absolute. We recycle these images through every major conflict, all pulled from the ink-stained pages to validate our current ruin. The motifs are the bait, and the chaos is the hook. Why do we cling to these verses? Because the alternative is the void. We look at the burning city and the fallen king, and we feel the ground beneath us shift. These motifs are not just stories. They are conduits for a primal, unspoken terror. The terror that order is a thin, brittle shell. We build walls, we draft laws, we crown leaders, and we convince ourselves that the structure is permanent. But the verses remind us of the truth we try to ignore. The gates are never truly locked. Chaos is not an intruder. It is a permanent resident, waiting in the shadows of every civilization. When we read that the sky turns black, we are not fearing a distant event. We are fearing the sudden, total collapse of our own daily reality. We need the prophecy to be true, because it suggests that even if the world ends, it does so according to a plan. It turns the random, senseless violence of history into a scripted tragedy. We would rather believe in a dark, preordained doom than accept that the world is fragile, unpredictable, and entirely indifferent to our survival. We stand at the gates, watching the horizon, hoping for a sign that someone saw the collapse coming. Look at the last 400 years. The same images recur with mechanical, terrifying consistency. We see the smoke of the 30 Years' War, the ash of the French Revolution, the rubble of the World Wars, and the burning oil fields of the modern era. The motifs are recycled, stripped of their original context, and forced into the frame of the prophecy. A cannon fires in 1648. It is the same fire from the sky. A border collapses in 1914. It is the same fallen monarch. A city burns in 1945. It is the same ash-choked horizon. We see the same patterns of human tragedy playing out on a loop. The faces change, the weapons evolve, but the physical destruction remains identical. We witness the same frantic crowds clogging the roads, the same stone walls crumbling under artillery, the same leaders signing documents in the ruins. It is a dizzying, relentless cycle. Every new conflict is immediately mapped onto the old, ink-stained verses. The mind breaks under the weight of pure, unscripted randomness. We stare at a silent sky and demand a reason. We watch a storm level a village and refuse to accept it as an accident of physics. We need a narrative. We need a beginning, a middle, and a conclusion. Without a story, the world is just noise, a terrifying, indifferent static. We cannot live in the void. So, we build a bridge of ink and paper. We take the random debris of a disaster and arrange it. We force the chaos into a pattern. We look at a collapsed bridge, a fallen stock market, or a sudden plague, and we reach for the quatrains. We are not discovering a prophecy. We are manufacturing a lifeline. The brain scans the text, skips the contradictions. We would rather be victims of a grand, ancient design than survivors of a random, meaningless event. The uncertainty is the enemy. The narrative is the shield. We stare into the dark, construct a ghost, and call it fate, just to keep from screaming at the silence. We summon him because the dark is too heavy to hold alone. We light the candles. We crack the spine of the book, and we call his name into the silence. He is not a man of the 16th century anymore. He is a ghost, a hollow vessel we fill with our own trembling. We project our collective anxiety onto his ink-stained lines until the paper vibrates with our own pulse. Look at the way we hold the book. We grip the edges, we scan the verses, we wait for the words to move. We are not reading history. We are performing a ritual. We need him to be watching from the shadows, a silent witness to our modern collapse. We need the ghost to validate our terror. When the markets crash, we invoke him. When the sirens wail, we whisper his name. He becomes the personification of the unknown, the dark mirror that reflects our own panic back at us. We have built him a throne out of our own uncertainty. He sits there, a static figure in the center of our chaos, waiting for the next tragedy to give him breath. We are the ones who keep the ghost alive. He is the shadow we cast when we refuse to face the light. The ghost begins to flicker when the light of history hits it. Historians do not look for omens. They look for dates, for records, for the cold, hard sequence of cause and effect. They open the archives and find the truth buried in the dust. The most famous predictions, the ones that supposedly shook the world, were never written in the original manuscripts. They were grafted onto the text decades, sometimes centuries, after the events occurred. It is a calculated deception. A scribe adds a line, A printer adjusts a margin, and suddenly, a vague verse becomes a precise account of a battle that has already been fought. The illusion of the prophet dissolves under this scrutiny. We find no divine foresight, only the frantic scribbling of opportunists. The timeline does not match. The evidence does not hold. The prophecy is not a mirror of the future. It is a forgery of the past. The prophet is stripped of his robes. The mystery is exposed as a parlor trick. The foundation cracks, the pedestal crumbles, and the ghost vanishes. The text remains, but its power is not in what it says. It is in what it refuses to define. Every quatrain is a linguistic trap, a set of shifting variables designed to collapse into whatever shape the reader requires. There are no clear nouns, no fixed dates, no singular subjects. The language is intentionally porous. A reference to a great bird becomes a plane, a rocket, or a plague, depending on the headline of the day. This is not a failure of translation. It is the core of the design. The ambiguity is the engine. It ensures that the verses can never be disproven because they never truly commit to a single reality. We scan the lines, searching for an anchor, and the text slides away from us, forcing our minds to fill the gaps with our own immediate terrors. It is a Rorschach test printed in ink. When we encounter a vague phrase about fire or falling kings, we do not see the 16th century. The ink on the page is static. The paper is brittle. The mystery is not held within the lines of the quatrains, but within the firing neurons of the person holding the book. We are hardwired to seek patterns in the noise. When the world fractures, when the ground shifts beneath our feet, our minds scream for a map. We do not look for the truth. We look for a signal that our suffering has a name. We project our own anxieties onto the ancient, dusty verses, and the verses, in their infinite ambiguity, offer no resistance. They accept our terror. They absorb our panic. They become whatever we need them to be. This is the ultimate twist. The prophecy is a mirror, not a window. We are not reading the words of a 16th century physician. We are reading the blueprints of our own modern dread. The mechanism is internal. It is the desperate human urge to impose structure upon the void. We find a word that matches a headline, a symbol that mirrors a disaster, and we experience a rush of recognition. That recognition is not discovery. To treat these quatrains as historical facts is not an act of scholarship. It is an act of erasure. It is the deliberate, systematic ignoring of the human mind. We look at the page, and we choose to see a map of the future, rather than a mirror of our own cognitive architecture. We push aside the reality of our own biases, the reality of our own pattern-seeking brains, and the reality of our own deep-seated fear. We build a wall of ink and paper between ourselves and the truth. By insisting that these words hold a secret, we avoid the terrifying weight of the present. We ignore the fact that the future is not written in the stars, but is instead being built by our own hands, our own choices, and our own failures. This is the ultimate denial. We prefer the comfort of a pre-written tragedy to the raw, unscripted reality of our own existence. We cling to the myth because the alternative is to admit that we are alone in the dark, without a guide and without a script. We trade our agency for the illusion of a foretold destiny. We prioritize the prophecy because it allows us to stop looking at the chaos we have created. We are choosing to be blind, and we are calling that blindness faith. We are not looking for a prophet. We are looking for a sedative. When the world feels too large, too sharp, and too unpredictable, we reach for these verses like a drowning man reaches for a stone. We do not want to see the future. We want to believe that the future is already contained, already finished, and already safe. This is the final, uncomfortable truth. We are not scholars of the arcane. We are architects of our own comfort. We take the cold, hard reality of the unknown, and we wrap it in the soft, familiar language of a prophecy. We trade the terrifying freedom of the present for the suffocating safety of a pre-written end. We are not searching for proof of a man who saw the centuries to come. We are searching for proof that we are not alone in our fear. We want to believe that someone, somewhere, has already walked this path. already suffered these losses, and already survived the fire. It is a desperate, human, and entirely understandable lie. We cling to the ink because the silence of the universe is too loud to bear. The candle on the desk has burned down to a pool of wax. The flame flickers, casting long, erratic shadows against the wall, and the light is finally failing. We are left in the dimming glow, staring at the ink-stained parchment that started this entire search. The room grows cold. The silence of the house presses against the glass. We look at these lines one last time, not as a map of the future, but as a mirror of our own hesitation. Why are we still here? Why do we keep our eyes fixed on these dusty, cryptic verses when the world outside is moving forward without us? The question hangs in the air, heavier than the smoke from the wick. Perhaps the true power of these words lies not in what they reveal about the centuries to come, but in what they expose about us right now. We are standing in the present, surrounded by the reality of our own lives. Yet we cannot bear to look at it directly. We need the distraction. We need the weight of ancient authority to tell us that our struggles have meaning, that our chaos is ordered, and that our fear is justified. We are not looking for a prophet. We are looking for a reason to stop trembling. As the final spark dies and the room slips into shadow, we are left with the terrifying present. The room is silent now, save for the faint scent of cooling wax and charred wick. Yet, the hand moves in the dark, fingers tracing the rough, yellowed edges of the parchment. We do not need the light to know what is written there. We have memorized the shapes of the words, the rhythm of the quatrains, the way the ink bleeds into the fiber of the page. It is a compulsion, a rhythmic return to the same dusty source. We are searching for proof, not for the truth of the events, but for the truth of our own anxiety. We want to believe that someone, somewhere, already knew the shape of the coming storm. We want to believe that the chaos we see in the headlines was already accounted for in a book written centuries ago. It is a strange, desperate hope. We look for a name, a date, a location, any scrap of evidence that the future is not a void, but a path already walked. We keep the verses close, pressing them against our palms as if they could offer a map to the unknown. We are not reading history. We are reading our own desire for a guarantee. We are looking for the ghost of a man who could tell us that we will survive, that the fire will pass, and that the world will hold. We are searching for a witness to our own existence. The parchment lies cold on the desk, its edges curled in the dark. We have reached the end of the inquiry, yet the weight of the ink remains. History is not a straight line. It is a recurring loop of instability, and these verses are the gears that keep the cycle turning. As long as the world fractures, as long as the ground shifts beneath our feet, these lines will wait. They are not dead letters. They are dormant. They lie in the margins of our collective memory, patient and hungry. When the next crisis erupts, when the next city burns, or the next plague takes hold, the hand will reach for the page again. The verse will be pulled from the shadows, dusted off, and fitted to the new tragedy like a key into a lock. It does not matter if the fit is forced. It does not matter if the logic is thin. The need for a pattern is stronger than the need for the truth. We will continue to project our fears onto these ancient, cryptic lines, and they will continue to provide the comfort of a pre-written fate. The candle is gone, the room is empty, and the silence is absolute. Yet, the verses endure. They wait in the dark, gathering strength from the next tremor, ready to be read again the moment the world begins to break. The screen fades to black, leaving only the echo of the prophecy, waiting for the next tragedy to give it life.